are live. All right. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to season 9 of Gather for Her. I'm Tina O. I am your moderator, and I'm grateful to be connecting with you all from Nehuelaquam, also known as Bowen Island in BC, Canada, on the soil originally named as Turtle Island, now known as the continent of North America. I'm grateful to rest my head and to play and to co-create with these wonderful beings here on the traditional unceded and ancestral territories, land and home to the Squamish people. Gather for Her invites you, our listeners, to be part of our co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors. And it's brought to you by Powerhouse, that's all of us here, and produced by Regen Media. At Powerhouse, we walk beside leaders to amplify their change work as they walk their path of whole leadership, guided by relational leadership practices and Indigenous wisdom. And our impact media producer is Regen Media, who invites us to take the power of media into our own hands by supporting stories that heal and regenerate and uplift and transform. And we're every 2 weeks here live on LinkedIn. And then we follow this up with a private interactive wisdom circle held only on the leader path. And that's our virtual fire. But I'll tell you more about that later. And I am going to pop in a few times during this recording to introduce you to different things that we have available for leaders like you who are ready to elevate and decolonize their leadership by walking an integrated path of whole relational leadership guided by Indigenous wisdom. So we are live. And so because of that, I know some of you are popping in, popping out. We invite you to introduce yourself to us as a listener or a viewer here in the LinkedIn chat. Let us know where you're connecting in from with an acknowledgement of gratitude for the lands in which you rest, play, and grow. And we get it. Like for some, you might feel awkward in that. You might not know what the words are. And what we want you to know is that relational leadership begins with awareness, and it's followed by a practice and is carried forward in future generations with an integrated knowing from our lived experience. So all of your lived experience is welcome here. Be awkward, come as you are, learn here with us, and we'll all soften and grow and co-create this world we're living into together. So let's begin. I'm going to pass to my sisters in change making and let them introduce themselves, and we'll introduce our special guest for today, who is also an Amplify Coach, Dori Howard, an Amplify Coach here with Powerhouse. And so some of you don't know what Amplify is. Amplify is a path and a platform. We're here to showcase your work as a change maker with an Amplify profile. We're here to do some performance coaching with you to further your impact in the world and connect you to our constellation network of fellow change makers, where we get behind you and personally introduce you to people who are waiting to know you and help you move your work forward. And Dori is a part of that, and she brings her specialized experience to that coaching model for change makers like you. So with that, I'm going to pass over to you, Shar, to introduce Dori Howard, and then we'll each self-introduce as we move along. Over to you, Shar.
Thanks very much, T. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning and to introduce our special guest. I'm Charlene Sanjenko, and I'm the founder of Powerhouse and Regen Media. When I think about who Dori Howard is and the gifts she is here to share with us today, some of the things that make me most excited are the caring person that I know she is and that I have experienced. She actually comes from over 30 years of healthcare experience that is grounded in pediatric oncology, nursing, and she's held various leadership roles. She's worked with many clients, both in the public and private sectors, to foster their transition to a more authentic self. And that's exactly what we're talking about with this season in relational leadership, to foster their transition to a more authentic self that demonstrates openness, curiosity, and compassion within the context of relationship, and striving for healthy conversations even in the midst of conflict. Dori has a collaborative approach to leadership and learning, and her clients include physicians, female first responders, leaders, caregivers, citizens, and teams to co-create meaningful relationships, retreats, and programs. And I love Dori's mantra. It's all about the learning. She builds experiential learning modules, into all of her programs, her coaching, and the experiences that she creates within her absolutely beautiful home on Salt Spring Island. Welcome, Dori. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And just love to say hello, and we'll pass it on to our other sisters to introduce themselves as well.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'll jump in, but I have to turn the mic on. Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Marshall, and I am really excited to be here today. Dori is one of my favorite people, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in a little while. I am coming to you from Lanceville on Vancouver Island, which is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Snuneymuxw and the Tsinawas people. And this is where I live, work, and play and study. And so I will pass on to Christina.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Oh, I'm so pleased to be here. My name is Christina Benty. I'm a co-host with Gather for Her. And I'm also an Amplify Coach with Powerhouse. There's so many amazing Amplify coaches that are in the house, which is very exciting. And at this very moment on the map, you can find me in the Rocky Mountains, in the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Shuswap peoples, and the Columbia River Métis, also known as Golden BC. And I have experienced firsthand Dori's grounding, wise presence and her ability to hold space in a rich and meaningful way. So I'm very excited about this conversation, and I just feel good already.
Awesome. Well, let's jump in. Hey, let's jump into our Dori, is there anything we missed in your bio that we were like, hey, or anything that's really present for you today? Like, I want to bring this forward before we jump into a question.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm super excited, and I just feel like I've sort of come home with you guys, just being in the screen together. So, and I'm excited for you guys to be here again. One thing I just wanted to add is I'm also calling in from Salt Spring Island, which is the unceded territory of the Halkami'knum and Senchothan speaking Coast Salish peoples. And I am honored and privileged to steward this land where I work and play and walk dogs and host people and gather people and, figure out the water situation day by day. So thank you. That's all I just wanted to add. So.
Love that. Thank you, Dori. So for viewers wondering what's going on here, they all seem to know each other. What's happening? So we have all gathered at Dori's at the retreat center, and so retreat center in various forms, whether we're writing together or strategizing together. It's a beautiful retreat center where you can bring your whole self. Is always invited at the table, and not just in retreat, but at dinner and in those in between places before you go to bed, and the moment at the beach when you lose your mind because you finally relaxed and the tears are coming, or up in yoga and the mat, are those moments in passing. We think of retreat places as places to rest, but they're places to let it all hang out. And I deeply appreciate that about the container that you hold, Dori. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Let's start with our first question, which is, Powerhouse is all about relational leadership. So why is relational leadership important to you, Dori?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. And well, first of all, we're relational beings. And so it just is almost an innate piece of leadership in terms of how do we actually move forward in relationship. We learn in relationship, we grow in relationship, we love in relationship, we change, we move through conflict in relationship. And so to me, that's the kind of the hallmark of being a leader, is to extend that from just being a whole person, but to being a whole leader in that. And with that, when I think about that is, yeah, I mean, we're wired for connection. I mean, we're wired for a lot of things, but we're wired for connection. And so it's important for us to be, as leaders, honoring that whenever we're interacting with somebody, there's always somebody behind that face, behind the behavior, behind whatever is showing up. And there's a deeper person within that. And so, you know, I mean, you talked about me holding space here, and I love to do that. I hold space here, like physical space, but the space between us. And whether it's a space between one person or a group of people, it's within that space, that energy that we're having together, where the magic and the connection and the aliveness happens in those spaces. And so to me, as a leader, it's really important to honor that space with each other.
And this, I would say, this all seems so obvious to us, right? It's like, yeah, we need one another. We need connection. We're wired for connection. Why do you think there's so much disconnect in our in our workplaces, in our communities, even in our homes, when it's actually something we long for?
Well, while we're wired for connection, we're also wired for a bit of dissonance. We're wired to keep ourselves safe. We're wired to keep ourselves constantly scanning the environment for threat. It's a very primitive wiring that we bring with us from many years ago. Like, I'm talking thousands and hundreds of millions of years, as we first came on the planet as human beings. So while we're wired for connection, we're wired also to make sure that we are protecting ourselves. And so with that comes the ego, and comes the space of going with our thinking brain. And so we try and sort of logically try and figure things out rather than lead from our heart. And when we start to lead from our heart center and lead from a place of love, and I don't mean intimate love, I mean caring and compassionate love, which is intimate as well. But I mean, that is, if we can sort of dive into that and not be always so logical, and let our, what I would call, and what Rick Hansen calls the negative mind, or what we call in yogi, the negative mind, take over, because it will. So there's so much in our world that drifts us away from flourishing. And so we have to always try and bring it back into this path that is our truest self. And when we're aligned with our truest self, when we stay on that path, then it's easier to continue to hold that space of connection and compassion and curiosity and courage and all those things that bring in what a relational leader is all about. But it's hard because we're always getting pulled off this path and the track. So that's why. So we have these two wirings. We are wired for connection. We're wired for just keep me safe and protected and don't let anybody in. So yeah.
So relational leadership is actually coming home to yourself.
It's your truest self. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know Sharon's going to jump in here.
I was just going to say, but that would require me being vulnerable.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, stop! Don't let me be vulnerable. Well, you see, that's the hitch, though, is that in order to be vulnerable, we do have to show up in all of who we are. And we're taught from a very, very early age. I mean, emotional development happens starts at about the age of 2. We're taught from a very early age to don't cry, don't be a crybaby, pull up your big girl panties, especially for women in leadership, right? We're taught from a very early age to be tough, be strong. I remember being told when I got a position in healthcare as a leader, well, you better, if you're going to be in this position, you better put on a tough skin. And I'm like, why would I do that? Why? What's that about? And so we're sent, be professional. Even as a nurse, we were told never to show our emotions with our patients. And I'm like, but why? That's who we are. We are emotional people. We show emotion all the time. And people think of showing emotions as only for the sadness piece. So when we cry, we show emotion, but we also show anger and fear and anxiety and all those other emotions that are gifts. So if we start looking at emotions as gifts, as they send us messages, they're there to teach us, they're there to soothe us, they're there to direct us and motivate us, then it's not so much about being vulnerable. It's about coming as my whole self in all of my glory, but all of my messiness. And if we can find a way to be emotionally agile, so we're not letting the emotions hijack us, but rather I can say I'm feeling very anxious right now and be present to that emotion, then my vulnerability isn't so scary because that's who I am and that's what's showing up for me. And it does take being present and grounded in the moment so that I can say that and experience that and then convey it in a way that makes sense to another person. So they're not trying to guess what's going on with this outward behavior that I may be displaying, and they have to make up their mind about what that is. Right. So that's how I approach vulnerability.
And of course, I was just being facetious with that, right? But, it's interesting because I'm in an MBA program, as you know, and right now our classes are in emotional intelligence, or leading with emotional intelligence is one of the classes. And so where it's teaching us to use emotional and to bring all your emotions to a situation through using emotional intelligence to do so. So not hiding them as we've been taught, especially in the boardroom and in the classroom, but to be emotionally and intelligent about how, because those emotions are important. They have value, right? And so I'd say there is a shift towards more emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so we bring on, so the thing is, the emotions are there. They're already present in the room or in your being. So it's a matter how to, like you say, convey them or express them in a way that's healthy and whole and not get hijacked from them. And I think that's the dance that we play. And Susan David calls it emotional agility, where we're always dancing with our emotions and where do we need to sort of tame them so that we don't fly off the handle, and where do we need to not suppress them? Once we suppress them, then they're going to blow up somewhere else. So it's really finding this healthy level of emotion so that you can actually be effective and have impact as a leader.
Where's that taken? Oh, I was going to go over to Shar, if that's okay, Christine, unless you've got something. Yeah, you good? It's going to just pop over to you, Shar, because the way I watch you walk in the world as a leader, is like emotions are always right there, and yet, and when they pop through, It's like there's always a fire of it underneath you, and you are probably the most tactical person I know. I'm just curious I don't know what you might share. What's alive for you in this emotional intelligence conversation?
Well, I think emotions are part of how we are experiencing and enjoying life. So to shortchange ourselves of emotions it feels like we're shortchanging our experience and our expression of life. And remembering that emotionality is just one component of our being. So I guess that's how I can be an extremely emotional person and also balance that with my physicality, my spirituality and my mental capacity. I wanted to circle back to one piece that Dori said that I think there's something very tactile in it. And it was, here we are in the world as beings that crave connection and protection. And so what's the secret sauce in the middle that allows us to play both sides? And I think that for me personally, what I've been playing with is it is curiosity for sure, because I absolutely am that person. And but when I really play into, I know what I can do on my own, but what I'm really curious about is the greatness in the glue in the middle. I'm really curious about intersectionality, when our gifts bump up, like that little space in between. And I wonder if that takes us anywhere in terms of a tactile best practice that we can push into in this conversation for leaders in terms of relational leadership. It's like, if we know we're this way, then how do we push into really wanting to explore and investigate the space between us, the connective tissue between us? Because I think that is such an important part of relational leadership. We're not going to get there how we got here. So I'm curious where that takes you guys.
Who's chiming in? I can chime in, but I don't know if anybody else would like to chime in.
Go for it, Dori. You're in the center of the square.
So when I think of this space between us, the one thing that comes to my mind is, so how do we get there? And to me, it's about presencing, and that's through and joy. So those are the sort of the two traits I would say are really important: are presence and joy. And I don't mean joy in #glee or #happy or just like just being a state. Joy to me is that state of being where you're in a state of calm, peace, and ease, even amidst chaos. And we achieve that through, and you talked about awareness at the very beginning in terms of being an important trait, and it truly is. So when we can cultivate that ability to be present in the moment, and it sounds cliche, but it's so true. And to me, that's where we can hold that space between, is in presencing ourselves, so that I can quickly be able to say, here's what's going on for me. This is my internal experience. I wonder what's going on for the other. And so there's that curiosity, right? So I'm always dancing between self and other. And when we have this balance of self and other, that's when we can actually then hold that space and not get hijacked by emotion or hijacked by the pull of whatever else is going on, but also not be too self-oriented or where the ego can reside. So that to me is where it all stems from. And as you know, part of what I do and part of my practice is cultivating a meditative mind or a neutral mind, so that I can be an observer of that rather than getting hijacked by some of the things that my mind will make stories up about, which we do all the time. And so having a contemplative practice daily is important to me. And that can look like anything. I happen to do meditation. But anytime that you have a contemplative practice where you're being an observer of your minds and you're letting that stuff go, helps us to rewire that wiring that is so primitive in our beings. It rewires those protective mechanisms that are not true, even though we think they're true. It helps us to sort of kind of just make those paths a little less accessible and make pathways for the wiring for connection. So to me, that's a tactical thing, and a very tangible thing that leaders can do is to adopt some kind of a morning daily practice where I would say, you get up, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, and you shower your mind. And you would never think of leaving the house without brushing your teeth. So I would never think about leaving my house without doing some kind of meditation in the morning. And it doesn't have to be long. It just is something where I'm just grounding and centering and noticing and being an observer and starting to practice that rewiring every day. Anyway, that's what I do. I do advocate that everyone does. And if I was back in healthcare, I would implement that as a practice in morning report with nurses. And anyway, that's where I go.
I know Christina's going to jump in a second. I know we've got new people joining us, so we're going to go to you in just 1 second. Christina, if you're just finding us here on LinkedIn and we're talking about what? Showering our mind? What? What is that? You've just landed in a Gather for Her conversation, a co-created conversation that we have at Powerhouse every 2 weeks with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors. It's brought to you by Powerhouse and produced by Regen Media. And we're here every 2 weeks live on LinkedIn. And then we unpack in a private wisdom circle on the Leader Path, which is part of Powerhouse. And what is the Leader Path? It's a place, it's a community of practice where we take steps to decolonize our leadership by being in a practice of whole leadership. That means making decisions at the speed of your whole person, whole leader, whole presence, all you. And we need to learn how to do that. It's not really how we've been conditioned to lead. So that's part of what's happening here. And I'm going to pass over to you now, Christina, because I know you got stuff. Over to you.
Thanks, Tina. And thanks, Dori, for that. And I wanted to say that you really model presencing and you model relational leadership. And so you're doing both the modeling and the teaching of that. And because you're a lifelong learner as well, what I'm curious about is what are you learning right now? What's your growing edge? Because like I said, you model that presencing. And what are you growing into? What just feels a little bit, pushes your boundaries a little bit, or like Tina says, that skinny branch. What's the skinny branch for you?
It's always this cultivation of joy that I always come back to, and I'm just engaged. I'm just doing right now a whole thing around joy, and I think okay, so how do I live that? How do I really live it? And it came to me yesterday morning as I was walking the dogs, and I've had a little bit of sadness in my life recently, and a bit of anger and frustration, which are all natural and normal emotions. And I'm like, okay, Dori, so you're all about this joy thing. So what's joy right now for you if you're feeling angry or sad? Because I always say, oh yeah, we can have joy in the midst of chaos. And I'm walking my dogs, and these 3 little dogs got their tails bouncing in the field, and they're picking up field mice and bopping them on the head or whatever they're doing with those mice. And I look at this vast expanse of this land that I feel so blessed to be on, and it's like, okay, part of being in relationship and in connection and in joy is also connecting with the land and the beings that I'm presencing myself with, which are these dogs who are they are gleeful. They're like in a glee state, right? And I think that's my biggest learning edge right now, is to continue to just notice this. I hate the word tension, but it's the only word I can come up with right now, between the emotions where I'm feeling sad and despair and lonely with this state of joy. And I always come back to my practice. And when I get back into my practice and get back into and you guys have all been to my classes and experienced some of the yoga, how can you not experience joy when you're chanting some beautiful music and some beautiful mantra and having that time just to be in your own space and holding yourself? So I think my biggest learning and continuous learning that I have is always around self-compassion. I think I've told you the story when I went to, therapist number 3 or 4 or whatever, and said, oh yeah, something about, have you looked at idiot compassion? I'm like, no, what is that? And having this ruminate in my head about, I've been an idiot with compassion all my life. So my constant learning is around I'm a very compassionate, empathic person to others. And how do I be that compassionate, empathic to myself? And it's a constant learning for me, because I've been pulled into this profession where it's about caring for others, usually at the expense of yourself. And so my biggest learning right now is, how do I care for others and hold space for others, and hold space for myself and care for myself? And I think that's going to be my lifelong learning until the day that I transition to the next realm.
Yeah, and I just want to pause for everybody listening here that it's not, we like to complicate these things, and it's very simple, but not simplistic.
No.
Right? Because it's cultivating compassion and presence for others and having other people's back, and then turning it inward to have our own back and to be present for ourselves and our own emotions and experience and cultivate joy. And the other thing I want to add for the listeners is this is hard work, and it's not airy fairy.
No.
Bring it on, give it a shot, try it for yourself.
I
dare you.
I don't think we would call the Dalai Lama or, all like airy fairy. I think we would call them very practiced. And so I think, it's not airy fairy at all. It's necessary and it's essential. And so when we think about essential services and essential practices, this is an essential service to ourselves. And it's not easy because it takes attention and intention and cultivating new habits. And that's why I talk about brush your teeth, wash your face, shower your mind, and just add that to your already adopted habits that you've got going, right?
And this comes back to the water that you mentioned at the beginning. Drink your water. Right?
It's not easy. And I just lost my train of thought. It's not easy. And I always call it the rat race that we're in, right? Makes it difficult for us to, I don't have 20 minutes. I don't have half an hour for myself, right? Yet, once we dedicate that time to ourselves, we realize that how on earth do I start my day without that? Like it's the investment in yourself that pays off very, very quickly.
This reminds me of the conversation, that your fellow Amplify coach, Kelly Beatty, is having with us around, we got into time again. We got into how much time does it take to be with your staff or your teams and have space for them to be real people. And again, we came into this, like, not real people, but like bring their whole self into the room. And that takes time and compassion and empathy, And here we are again. It's so interesting, the conditioning of our relationship with time. And I even want to challenge us, like, what's beyond this transactional way of looking at time? Well, when we put the time in, we get time later. What's beyond even that? And I think the dogs are our greatest teacher. Dori, back to you.
Because they're so in the moment. I mean, dogs are so in the moment. They forget what's happening 2 seconds ago and what's down the pipe. It's like just this moment. And I know it's cliche, but really that's all we really have is the now. And I mean, Eckhart Tolle, who has a property here in Salt Spring, and he wrote The Power of Now, and he's all about the now. And I think for me, it's about, and I can say this now, but this has been a huge learning for me over my course of my career, and I feel very blessed and privileged to be able to be in the space where I have learned and then learning that in order for me to be of service to others, I need to be of service to myself, and that involves the practices that I adopt to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And when I deviate from that, I get sick. And when I get sick, I am no good to anybody. I'm no good to my dogs. I'm no good to the people. I'm no good to the people that be here. And I suffer. And when I suffer, others suffer. So I think, and I learned, and this is a lesson I learned over and over and over again. And each time I get to that space, I'm like, okay, Dori, here you are again. So what do you need to bring yourself back into health and wholeness? And it's always come back to the practice, come back to your healthy foods, come back to your nature, connect with the trees, like go and hug something or lie in the grass or connect to this land that we are so blessed to be on. Like all of those things come into it. And so if I don't have time for a half an hour meditation, I do have time for 3 minutes of breathing outside on my balcony, looking at the trees, petting my dog. Everybody has time for that. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes intention and attention. We can learn it now, we can learn it later, but we got to learn it at some point.
I want to steer us, Dori. I mean, not all of us, but a lot of us in this space do work from home or have a lot of that maybe in our life. But I know there's listeners who don't, and I know that a lot of your work as a coach is with people who don't necessarily work from home. And so what would you offer around relational leadership? It sounds like where we're going is self-relationship in this conversation. For those who may not have that tree and that dog in their day.
Well, yes, and I've worked in healthcare, which is a bit of a beast of an organization and an industry, and it's a necessity. And so one of the things that I was really tried to adopt when I was in healthcare, we'd sit down, and of course you've got your big agenda, and you've got all these, first whatever, new business, old business, blah blah. But it's like, let's have connection before content. So let's do a round of where are you at right now? What are you proud of in this moment? And you just do a quick round, and you right away ground people into about connection with each other, the space, who we are. And then let's launch into the agenda, right? And then as you close, before we all disperse, one word checkouts or something like that. So you can integrate a lot of these things into a busy practice but again, it takes intention, attention, and leadership. So, you could easily at the beginning of each meeting do a 1-minute breathing exercise. They're doing this now in the military and in the RCMP and everything, and all first responder professions, helping people to adopt breathing practices. Because we know that of course, access to our breath is the single most important thing that we can do to presence in the moment. You can't do anything else if you're consciously breathing. So if you consciously breathe, you're in the now. So it's the easiest thing, and we all have access to it, and it's free. And so what I would say to people who work in these busy, hectic organizations, step into your leadership, lean into it, and insist that your meetings start with either some breath work or some connection. And just even simply, if you get into your brain connection before content, or put that at the top of your agenda, connection before content, breath work, 2 minutes. We have time for 2 minutes to connect. I know we do. I know absolutely we do. So that's what I would say to busy people who work in busy organizations and who are always pulled off their track. They're always drifting away from their truest self every minute of the day. So how can you help them come back onto the path, even just for a minute? And it's through the breath.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Dori. One other thing that sometimes I tell people is like, you have to wash your hands, right? So if you wash your hands, paying attention to water running over your hands, right away it takes you out of your thinking brain and you're into that sensory experience. So speaking of sensory experience, you and I have both talked about experiential learning and what a powerful tool it is. How do you incorporate experiential learning to help leaders build those relational leadership muscles? I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh man, every day, all the time. Everything I do is experiential, because to me, I've always been, you learn through, my kids learn through play. They learn through play. We learn through experiencing. And so I'm all like, I call myself the chief experience officer, CEO of ENSO. And that's really what it is. And so right from the early days of being a nurse, I created so many games when I did teaching. Everything to me was a game. And, I created this game called Tumor Trivia, which I know probably doesn't sound very fun to you guys, but when you work in cancer, who wants to learn about cancer from a PowerPoint? Not me. I want to learn it through a game. And so when you start to incorporate those kinds of things, it helps things stick. So I've been all about the games and the creative ways to get people to learn when they don't even know they're learning. Same like kids don't know that they're learning when they're playing. And so in my retreats, I do the same thing. We did an emotions. What did we do last time? We did emotions charades, right? And so we played a game of charades, and it was all about, names of, movies and books and that kind of stuff. So it just helps to sort of get people into a learning mindset without it being a big drag, right? Kundalini yoga is about experience the experience of your body moving and the breath moving and the chanting and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's not just sit and talk about getting into nature. Let's go out and do a forest bath. Let's not just talk about healthy nutrition. Let's do it. Let's do some mindful eating and see what it feels like to really experience that strawberry. So it's putting people into those experiences where instead of just talking about them, let's just ground ourselves and do it.
That goes back to Char's, a lot of the founding pieces of Powerhouse around activation and acceleration, right? There's a lot there. There might be some new people joining us since we're on a social platform, and we are moving into kind of our last 10 minutes. So if you're just finding us here on LinkedIn, welcome. You've landed in Gather for Her, a co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors, brought to you by Powerhouse and produced by Regen Media. We are here every 2 weeks, so if you're liking it, come on back and then join us on the Leader Path. It's a 30-day free trial, and we unpack this conversation in depth on the Leader Path. And we want you there because we know that you're a change maker. We know that you care about relational leadership because you're in this conversation. At Powerhouse, we amplify the change work of relational leaders with our Amplify program, which Dori is a part of. She's one of our Amplify coaches. And the Amplify program leverages everything that Powerhouse has to offer for leaders like you. We have an amplification platform to showcase your changemaker profile. We offer performance coaching on your Amplify path to further your impact in the world. And you have access to our constellation network of fellow changemakers. And we're going to get behind you to personally introduce you to people who are waiting to know you. So we want to know you. We're so glad you're here. Make sure you're chatting over here on our LinkedIn chat so we can reach out to you after. And as we kind of shore this up in our last bit, we had a third question that we had to play with was, Dori, from your changemaker perspective, what do you think is the most important practice as a relational leader?
Well, I've already talked about this, but it really is about, it comes back to me being able to be whole myself so that I can be whole with others. And it is about the practice of cultivating joy, cultivating presence, and leaning into those things that bring you to that moment. The more that we can be present in the moment, and again, because things are going to drift us out of that all the time. So cultivating the practices that help me stay connected to myself so I can stay connected to you. If I'm not connected to myself, then I will go back up into my head and I'll let the stories just start to ruminate and create a whole bunch of things that we do because we're meaning-making machines. And so we're constantly looking at everything that comes at us in the environment and we're making a story about it. And most of them aren't true. And so if we can sort of get from our heads back into our hearts, lead from the heart with all of who we are. We're body, mind, heart, and soul. So it takes being able to be, what is the yearning of my heart saying? What is actually coming from here rather than what's coming from here? And when I come to listen to the yearning of my heart, which takes deep listening, by the way. So maybe that's the main trait is how do I cultivate deep listening within myself? And the more that I can cultivate that, I will be able to deeply listen to another. And hold space for another. And so I can't do any of the other things, I don't think. I can't hold space. I can't listen. I can't connect. I can't relate if I'm not being here in this moment and joining with you. So I can join with me and join with you, but I need to do that from a place of being calm, connected, and having ease in my life, even when things are trying to pull me off of that path. And I can feel it. When things start to pull me off the path and I start getting hijacked by an emotion, I come back to this place of what brings me joy. So, and that can be very simple. And I have to really practice that so that in the moment, what brings me joy, it might be my dog sitting here and ready to sort of, play. It could be this beautiful arbutus tree that's outside my window, and what an awe that tree is, even though it's messy and causes me a lot of raking moments, it's a beautiful tree. The ocean, I feel really glad I can look at any given moment. It's like, yeah, that brings me joy right there. So it's really about what brings me joy and what brings me to presencing so that I can be there for me, so I can be there in service to others. I think everything else falls from that: courage, compassion, care, connection, curiosity. All of those things fall out of this moment of me being present.
Wow.
And all of those things are actually key competencies for the leaders that our current and future environment needs, right? Yeah. Courage, wisdom, emotional regulation, groundedness, joyful leadership, all of those competencies. Mm-hmm. I am, and as you coach leaders and as we all, work to model that, may it someday be a well-worn path instead of a gnarly one like it is now.
We're getting there. I'm so excited to see what's happening in the schools and in the and with children now. And so many of the people who I interact with who are young moms, they're teaching their kids around, there's yoga in the schools now, and there's breath work, and they do morning breath work before they start their school. And I one of the things you talk about experiential learning, one of the easiest things to teach kids around breath work is get them to blow bubbles. Get humans, adults, to blow bubbles. How fun is that? You cannot not take a deep breath to blow a bubble. And so blowing bubbles or blowing out candles, like put the cake farther away. I have to take a deeper breath to blow those candles out, right? So there's lots of fun ways that we can get people to do to be, present without going to a silent retreat, which a silent retreat is great too. But there's lots of things that we can do, and so I think it's not as far as you think it may be. Yeah.
Fantastic. We always close, Dori, with just a round of what we're leaving with from this conversation. And I'd like to do that, and then we'll close our circle. I'll start because my mic's on. Oh, I am leaving with a sense of hope, a deep sense of hope. It seems to be a theme. I think that's happened a lot in the season 9. Yes, I'm leaving with a sense of hope, and I think also like an integration of the words of what we know to do or are learning to do, and the knowledge of what we are learning to do, and the integration of the word practice of it. That's what I'm leaving with, is the word practice, because it feels like an integration word that's different than getting active. Get practiced. Yeah, thank you. That's where I am. And I'm going to pass to Shar. Or not. Oh, there she is.
I'm leaving with connection before content. Just that reminder all the time that the deeper my relationship is with myself, the deeper it will be and offer to others. And I think relational leadership, you can feel the depth of the leaders who put time into themselves. Yeah. I'll pass to Sharon.
Thanks, Sharon. Oh, such a great conversation, Dori. Thank you so much. Joy and presence are two things I'm really trying to cultivate in my life. And so I appreciate everything that you said. The one thing that stood out for me, though, is something another reminder for myself, and that is self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's so difficult most of us at times can be very hard on ourselves, and I know I know that I am that. So self-compassion. Thank you, Christina.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. When you were talking, Dori, it reminded me of that saying, if you don't make time for wellness, then you better make time for sickness, right? And so it's not just physical, it's mental, emotional, spiritual, relational. That's a garden that we need to cultivate, and that it needs our attention. Otherwise, it just, are you going to just allow the weeds to grow, or are you going to cultivate a beautiful garden? And I want to thank you, Dori, as well, for just really modeling that. And you model it by your very, very presence. So thank you.
The dog.
Love the dog.
Dogs are rumbling.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I love it. That's our first kind of non-circle conversation. I mean, the dogs are talking now. Woohoo! They're here.
They're in the moment. There's something that's caught their attention. I think what I'm leaving with is, I feel right now, my heart has extended, now it's like 10 sizes too big, and so I feel like my heart has actually grown through this hour with you. And so I feel that. And to me, that's that's joy. And I just feel so much joy being here with you and being in this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Dori. And thank you for joining us on Gather for Her. This is a co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors. And this conversation has been recorded. So if you want to we need to send this, I need to send this to somebody, they can watch it here on LinkedIn, but it's also going to be shared on our YouTube channel. And again, as a podcast renamed as How for Her, which you can find on Spotify and all the other places that you listen. So you can walk and listen to this again. Gather for Her is hosted by Powerhouse, where we walk beside leaders to amplify their change work as they walk their path of whole leadership, guided by relational leadership practices and Indigenous wisdom. Many, many thanks to our impact media producer and sister company, Regen Media, who reminds us that we can take the power of media into our own hands when we support stories that heal, regenerate, uplift, and transform. And thank you to the hands at all of our backs here on Gather, Powerhouse and Regen's digital storytellers, Zoe Gray, Madeline Archibald, and Willow Smith. And many thanks to you, my co-hosts and sisters in change, the braid of Powerhouse, Charlene Sanjenko, Christina Benti, Sharon Marshall, and me. And to all of you, our listeners, our community of change makers, leaders, and social impactors, thank you for walking with us in co-creation of the world we're living into together. We want you to know that you are always welcome here each week on Gather for Her, and there's always a place for you at our fire in Powerhouse. So much love to everyone, and we'll see you all next week on the Wisdom Circle when you jump into the Leader Path for your 30 days free, and we'll unpack this. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all next week. Thanks.